Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about why weed isn't as harmless as everyone thinks. Now, I'd like to preface this by saying I've been on the other side of this argument for most of my life. I used to think that weed wasn't harmless at all. Like in high school, I would smoke quite a bit with my boys. Wasn't ever really a big deal, but as I got older and gained more experience and kind of saw people who used it more heavily, and how it affected their lives, my tone or my opinion towards it has pretty much shifted. And honestly, I'm glad it has. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience with quitting. Like I said, I've been on the other side of this argument for quite some time, pretty much most of my life. This really kind of started in college. Well, I guess back in high school. I used to smoke quite a bit in high school, mainly just because of boredom and, you're a kid, like you don't really care about school. It's the cool thing to do. You want to have a good time with your buddies. I'm sure if you're listening to this video, you get it. That carried on into college, but about halfway through, about my sophomore year, I just had enough of it. I couldn't think as critically as I was able to in the past. I noticed my confidence was dwindling, and overall, I just wasn't really the person that I wanted to be, so I quit, just cold turkey. And to be honest, the downsides weren't really that bad, or I guess I should say the withdrawals. I mean, I'm sure like other drugs or substances are much worse, but I mean, the only thing I really felt was kind of just a sense of boredom more than I usually would. Just doing simple tasks, I would want to smoke, or if I didn't have anything to do one night, I would want to smoke, but I just never did. I just decided, you know what, I'm done. We're not going to do this. But the same could not be said for my roommates. Now, don't get me wrong. I love those guys. They're still friends to this day, and we get along great. But I didn't really notice how weed affected myself until I saw how it affected them from a outside perspective. And one of the first things that I noticed was how much of a strain that it had caused on their lives, whether that be their academic performance or their physical health. And every time we'd have these conversations with each other, because I would talk to my roommates about it all the time, they would say, "Bro, weed's not addictive. I can quit whenever I want. Like, it's just weed." It's like the same old thing you always hear. And I simply said, like, okay, then why don't you? This is not good for you. You know it's bad. I, as your friend, care about you. I see the financial strain that it's causing on you. You can't do anything without it. It's obviously not good for you, so why not do it? But there was always some sort of defense. There was always oh, who cares? It's just weed. It doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me too much. I'm still passing my classes. I can still exercise, blah, blah, blah. Like, they still had an excuse for every single sort of issue that I brought up. And this kind of bothered me more than anything because it really showed me how addiction takes control of the brain. And it's not something that I think anybody should have to experience. I also want to take a minute to talk about how I feel like weed has changed over the years. I know I'm not the only one to recognize this because I've had conversations with some of my buddies about this, and these are guys that still smoke to this day, so I feel like they're a pretty valid resource. But I remember being in high school and I'd split a J with my homies, and it was fine. We'd smoke, we'd go to the pool, walk around, ride our bikes, do whatever, right? We're just kids. But it seemed like over the years, as I got older, I would smoke and I would just become extremely paranoid. It wasn't enjoyable, it wasn't fun, it was honestly miserable. And that kind of drove me to question, why am I doing this? Like I don't enjoy it. I'm not having fun. I feel terrible whenever I'm on it. Like what's the point? And I think that also kind of helped me get to a position where I was able to realize, okay, I have a problem. Like I don't enjoy this. I'm not having fun. This isn't good for me, but I keep doing it. And I think that I'm not the only one to realize this. Like obviously other people have, I'm sure, experienced these same feelings and have made the decision to either quit or maybe not. Maybe they're still using it. But regardless, this was a really big factor in driving my decision to quit weed for good. Next, I want to talk about how quitting weed improved my life. Now, the first thing I noticed was mental clarity. I feel like I was able to think about things much more clearly, and this applied not only to my classes, because at the time I was in college, but it also applied very deeply to my personal life. Any sort of personal issues that I had encountered, whether they be relationship issues or just internal issues that I was kind of dealing with, I was able to think through them a lot more clearly. I was able to come up with solutions that helped me solve these problems. I was able to study more effectively. I was able to communicate more effectively. And overall, this kind of helped me get over that that pit that I was stuck in when I was, I guess addicted to weed. Kind of crazy to say that, but that's just what it is. I think the second thing that I noticed, which was by far the most uncomfortable, was the emotional aspect. When you smoke weed constantly, you don't really notice how it numbs your emotions or the degree that it numbs your emotions too. And when I quit, everything felt out of control. I felt super anxious, like a lot more anxious than usual. And, I felt that everything was boring, just doing simple tasks around the house or doing doing chores or just taking care of myself, like going to the gym, it just felt so much more boring. And the last thing I noticed was I didn't really have a lot of happiness. Like, obviously, I think that was because my dopamine levels were shot, so I was kind of feeling a little bit depressed and sad. But even then, that felt a lot more amplified than it had felt before. And this gave me a great insight as to how I had just been numbing these emotions when I was smoking weed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this was a bad thing. See, I think that experiencing emotions in their entirety is extremely important to the human experience. I think that if you experience sadness, you should experience sadness to the fullest extent. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that you should be a dope and whine and just look for sadness in everything you see, but I think that if you are sad, you should go through it and you should just let it happen and deal with it. The same could be said for happiness or fear or anxiety. I think these are all natural things that we need to experience because they not only help us learn to grow and to solve new and complex issues that we encounter as we get older and we experience new things, but it's part of the human experience. And having a sober mind, being able to experience these things is what makes us human. It's what connects us. It's what makes us who we are. All right. Lastly, I want to talk about how to quit weed. So maybe you're somebody who finds yourself in this exact same position. You've been smoking for a while, it's gotten out of hand. Maybe you're starting to realize that you're seeing more of the cons than the pros and you want to get out of it. Well, I think the most important thing that you need to do is try to find something that brings you joy internally. Now, for me, it was going to the gym and running. I know a lot of people hate running, so I mean, do whatever floats your boat. But for me personally, it was going to the gym and taking it seriously. I'd gone to the gym before. Ever since I graduated high school, I started lifting. But it wasn't until I started taking it seriously, actually dedicating myself to it, that I was able to see results, measurable results. And this brought me immense joy internally because I was feeling a sense of fulfillment. I had a goal and I worked hard to achieve a certain goal, and I'm still working hard to achieve this goal. But being able to do something that gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, something that allows you to feel as though you are contributing to something greater than yourself, whatever it may be for you. I'm not the person who's going to tell you what that is because everybody's different. And you may hate working out or running or whatever it is, and that's totally fine. But as long as you find something that brings you joy and that makes you feel fulfilled, I think you're going to be fine. Now, to wrap things up, I do want to say that if you are somebody who's struggling with weed, this video is not meant to talk down on you or make you feel bad in any sort of way. Hopefully you realize that by the end. But really just kind of served as a way for me to kind of vent and just talk about my experience thus far. If you like the video and you want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe, leave a like, tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to get back with you guys. I'm going to be making more of these videos, so going to be hearing my opinion on a lot of different topics. Maybe I'll share some more experiences with you all, but until next time, great talking with you.